So no matter what title you hold or what area of the business you are responsible for, it remains critical to constantly find ways to thrive in the future. What are the right skills that you need? Is it commercial savvy? Is it technical skills? Is it more people skills? I'm Anneke Andrews, and it is my absolute pleasure to have two top executives to share their perspectives with us this morning. Aarti Takoordeen is the CFO of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and Celiwe Ross is the Human Capital Director, Old Mutual Ltd. Welcome.
Thank you, Anneke.
So, what do you believe are the most critical things that we should look at in terms of the future, Aarti?
Thanks, Anneke. I just firstly want to say that whatever I say here, I have complete and deep respect for HR professionals. I think it's a very exciting portfolio, and I'm so excited to speak in a non-finance function, really. I think what is the key elements of tomorrow, which I don't think is going to be new for anyone here, is the rapid rate of adoption and availability of advanced technology. If you haven't already, you should read the Future of Jobs report that the World Economic Forum recently published for 2018. And it is almost reading exactly South African company dynamics. It's so relevant to South African, to corporate South Africa. And this rapid rate of adoption is something that will just increase between 2018, 2022 and beyond. And so the focus on human employees, and we use that word a lot these days, human employees, has been elevated. But at the same time, we've got to be alive to the reality that we live in a country that's also facing some urbanization dynamics, some cultural fusions going on, and so that just exacerbates the challenges of the HR function.
Absolutely. And Celiwe, how do you see, for example, the interaction with the privilege of us having Aarti as a CFO here, and also someone that's had some holding the HR seat experience? How do you see the interactions between the CFO and the CHRO?
Personally, I think that I feel that the HR, or the human capital function in and of itself, is changing. And much of what Aarti has raised is exactly what's changing the function. Because I think whilst the dynamics in the workplace and the composition of skills and also people and other artificial intelligence type skills start to coexist, the ability of humans to be human is going to become so much more important. And I think the ability to empathize and to be able to link more with people in order to be able to analyze, assess, impact, influence becomes so much higher. And so my fundamental, and maybe my situation is different because I actually recruited our CFO, so our relationship started before he started with Old Mutual, and a lot of that has helped me, I think, because firstly the credibility was established, and also a lot of the work that was done, just getting him on board and onboarding him as well, was done before he actually arrived. I do think that the most important thing for me in the conversations that I have with Casper are about relevance. It's about the business conversation, and that's irrespective of the role, whether he's the CFO or the Chief Risk Officer or any one of our product heads. It really is about understanding what the business is and what the business needs before we start talking about the people. Otherwise, we just become glorified recruiters, glorified people who hire, fire, and discipline, rather than really leading that business. That's what was worked for me.
Absolutely. I think that leadership, that leadership is absolutely key. Aarti, I'm very keen to hear about your experience in holding the HR seat and how you found that.
It was a very short period of time, but I thought the HR function absolutely rocks. I had so much fun. I mean, the fact that we have relatively less constraints, don't get me wrong, it's not an easy job at all. So I have, as I say, the deepest of respect, because the numbers don't talk back at you, and the numbers can't pull out the free text in the engagement surveys. So you do have a tricky portfolio, but the fact that you have no God-given or government-given deadlines, okay, you don't have to work in this kind of deadline, non-negotiable environment like I do, and see the scary constraints around commercials like I do, I thought it was quite liberating. And I felt like the autonomy that the HR portfolio has got is quite cool. The constraints are very different. It's those uncomfortable, difficult, tricky constraints. And exactly as Celiwe pointed out, you've got to influence people and you've got to really partner effectively. And it amplified for me the importance of engagement and deep relationship building. So it definitely made me a better human being, getting back into the, removing that double hatting role from HR and moving back into the CFO function. And I amplified the importance of relationship building within my team when I returned back to my team. So it was exceptionally cool. I have to say it was fun.
That's great. Celiwe, from your perspective, what do you think CFOs expect of CHROs, or how can CHROs better support CFOs?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I mean, I think it goes beyond just the CFO. I think CFOs are important stakeholders in any executive relationship, but for me it goes across the lines around what other executives are expecting from their CHRO. For me, the most important thing is, as I said, business knowledge. Without understanding what makes their areas tick and function, and also without presupposing or at least anticipating what it is that's going to come and where the needs are going to arise and how we jointly fill those and anticipate those, it makes the role quite difficult. So for me, I found investing a lot in learning what those business lines were about and what was going to drive a change or a differentiator in those areas has been really helpful. I also think engagement, as Aarti has said, I happen to sit next to our CFO as well. We sit completely open plan, which is not for everyone. I like it, I enjoy it a lot because I feel the conversation happens a lot easier. And even as I walk in the day, I can pass 2 or 3 others that I can raise a few things with and check in with and just check that we're on the same basis, so that helps. The physical proximity helps, and our ability to be able to sit and bounce things off of each other that sometimes are not even work related or challenges that he is experiencing or I'm experiencing. Because it helps us not only view each other as peers, but we understand the challenges that we're facing. There's a number of things that I need from my CFO. Getting my budgets approved is one of them. And making sure that the finance community understands what it is that we're motivating for. That's a cost, yes, but the value add and the direct impact that they get to have on their own businesses. So I find our level of engagement and interrelationship with each other really, really helps. And we build our own set of credibility with those conversations that are not necessarily about the core things that I need to perform for him or vice versa.
Because if you think about it, your HR role is actually pervasive across the leadership of the organization.
Correct.
Because it's through your people that you achieve results.
Correct.
And so it's such a key component that stitches into each of the leadership roles.
Yeah, correct.
Aarti, so what are the kind of things that a CHRO could do to help for the budgets to be approved easier?
So I think what I need from the CHRO is a balance. So the balance of understanding the business and understanding our strategic challenges going forward, and the challenges around being relevant. So every organization is faced with these challenges around being relevant, upskilling, reskilling, technology displacing different skills we require. And so growth is going to come from our people being a lot more agile and a lot more, I would say, diversity friendly in the country. So being a lot more effective within a changing dynamic in the country. As I said, our country is in a beautiful space right now. So I expect our CHRO to see that, to understand where we're at and what it is we need to do to be more relevant. And then at an operational level, understand the business, understand what stage the business is at, understand the commercial constraints, because we will always be in an environment of commercial constraints, and be able to help me prioritize where is it we can spend our efforts on first. We can't solve for world peace all at one go, but where is it that we can be most effective in rolling out different programs within the organization and being able to support and enable that business for the growth. So I don't know about you, but I often see this challenge of the one space we actually underspend on is training and development. And a lot of people complain that we don't have enough time. And so I actually put that squarely on the CHRO's, doorstep to say, help me. And it's not very useful when we know we've got to be relevant, we know we've got all these constraints, but it's not very useful if we're underspending on L&D, because we know that the growth is going to come from upskilling and reskilling. So how do we help the workforce, even though it is tricky and difficult, but I lack the skills to bring them along that journey. And that's what I look to the CHRO to partner on.
And if you look into the future, it's going to be a situation where most people have a lot of different roles and a lot of different jobs for that matter. And so from that perspective, the essence of lifelong learning is absolutely key. Celiwe, how do you do that in your organization?
Look, I say this firstly with a lot of respect for everyone in the room and everyone in the function, but also because I've really been in my role for 4 months. And being a pretty non-traditional human capital director, because I didn't grow up in the function at all. And so my perspectives are always different, and maybe that's what the organization needed. At least I hope so, because that's what they're getting.
I'm sure.
So I think the first thing for me around what everybody's reading about these organizations of the future and co-working with robots and modular workers and stuff, and I think all of that is coming. But I do think that there's a level of organizational maturity that we still need to reach that in many instances we're just not ready for. I know we certainly aren't, but we're already conscious of the fact that we need to get there. For me, the first thing is really understanding what you have, who are they and what they do. But a lot of where we go and what we're going to develop is driven purely by what our strategy is for the future. And once we understand where it is that we're going as an organization and how we want to present ourselves, then do we have the people that are going to get us there? Because certainly in financial services, our game is all about people. That's who enables us to be able to perform what we do. And so the people that we've got, can they get there, and how do we enable them to get there? I do agree with Aarti, actually. I think that learning and development just as a function is very little understood and also underinvested in. And oftentimes I think we've taught people that learning is all about booking a venue, getting a course, getting someone to stand in front of them and facilitate. And I've seen quite a level of immaturity in terms of people wanting to self-learn, and the ability to be able to self-learn is going to become increasingly important. Because it's not just about reskilling, it's actually about the ability to be able to multi-skill yourself and unlearn and relearn new things, because change is going to be a permanent. It's just not going to go anywhere, and organizations are going to need to consistently keep up with that change to become relevant. So I think people's ability to be able to reinvent themselves and to learn things quickly, and our ability as organizations to create the environment for them to be able to learn. I mean, there's some fantastic vendors out there that are all about mobile solutions in this space, and those mobile solutions aren't just about getting pay slips and taking leave. They're about the end-to-end spectrum of what we do in human capital functions, but also the ability to be able for people to be able to self-elect when they learn, and also what they want to learn about. I see my function a lot as a bit of an iTunes for anyone who's a fan of Apple. Once you make enough purchases in iTunes, it starts to understand what you like and starts to predict what you may like and starts to give you options around, well, what about this? Have you considered that? And sometimes can give you different options that can challenge what you do. And once you start to get that level of maturity for people, because it's not even just about teaching them how to do the jobs that they're in now, you may well be teaching them about jobs they may not even occupy where you are. And organizations need to get to a level of maturity with being comfortable with that.
Definitely. What are the kind of, Aarti, what are the kind of resources, or where do you look, who do you speak to, what are the kind of recommendations you would make? Because the world is so filled with vast amounts of information. You know, the question is, how do you easily and practically access what's most appropriate or most helpful?
I think the nexus of this solution really lies in understanding your business. Because you're quite right, there's an enormous amount of information out there. There's an explosion of data and techniques and technologies. But if you don't bring something home that is fit for purpose for your organization, you're not going to necessarily get any subscription for that. So I think that is key. I refer back to that World Economic Forum document, and if you look at those skills required in 2022 and 2018, and then there's a gray area, and they make it gray, and it says the skills that will be disregarded going forward. Yes. One of those is managing people, and I thought, oh, amazing. But that's exactly talk to Celiwe's point about self-management and self-management tools. So I think that one needs to, I mean, it's no different from what I'm facing as a challenge in my organization in terms of finance itself. What I'm doing is I'm using technology to automate, to take the transactional non-value add work, which I think is the equivalent of HR ops, reduce the time spent on that, still produce it, reduce the time spent on that, and then increase the time spent on the value add activities and insight driven activities and the change management activities that can come out of that useful technology, because we all sit on a lot of information that's relevant to our organization. But I'm not so sure how effectively we are sharing it across the organization. So if you have internal information that's relevant to your organization and you add value and insight to that information, that's how you have a competitive edge over someone just Googling and downloading a whole host of information. And you take that to your business counterparts and add value and share insight that they wouldn't have ordinarily have seen, trends that they wouldn't have seen if it weren't for your provision of this information. And that's exactly what I do in my finance function. But there's no different in the BP, HRO, talent, recruitment spaces in HR. And I think that's how you start becoming more relevant and value add. And when you shift into that space where your business counterpart says, I can't have this conversation without my HR BP here. Or you shift into that space where they say, but I'm okay with it, but won't you check with your HR BP first? Or you shift into that space where you say, and I do it often, I call my CHRO and I say, I need your guidance on this. That's when you actually, those are pragmatic, critical, key performance indicators of success. Yeah?
I see you nodding, Celiwe.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think Aarti's touched on a few things that are certainly important to me, and I think many organizations are grappling with the same thing, is what do you qualify as respectfully non-value adding? It's data input, it's processing of information that can be housed in one place centrally and can be used to start to inform decisions. And it starts to lift people up to have firstly the capacity, but also the ability to start to make insightful decisions that they can use to help advise or guide. Because data in and of its own is fine, it's just information. It's the ability to be able to translate that data into insights and into predictive insights, which is certainly the journey that I know we were walking from an entire human capital function. Because the ability for someone to then be able to say, actually, I need to make this decision, let me quickly call my HR BP or my HRE in my function just to double check what they think, and is this aligned with what we're trying to co-create, becomes the powerful conversation.
Definitely. So, Aarti, maybe I should ask you first. What do you think the future of HR looks like? If you had a crystal ball and you had to look into many years into the future, what do you think this would look like?
I think it is, it's an enablement function for the organization. I think it is very, very strategic. It is at the nexus of value-based leadership, and it is that exact balance that I spoke about in the organization. So, you know, we are going to look more and more to our HR counterparts to be able to help us move into that space of relevance, and the upskilling we spoke about, the reskilling we spoke about, that enablement of innovation and critical thinking, all those skills that we require in the workforce, we're going to look for that. I myself am working with universities, business schools, psych and the likes, to say CAs need to come out with different soft skills, okay? But we know that we are in that situation where we've got organizations that are dealing with people currently existing in the workforce, and then new people coming in, new entrants into the workforce. We've got to manage that. So that problem doesn't go away and it's tricky to manage this fusion. Problem doesn't go away, you know, for a number of years, and we need CHROs to be able to help us navigate through these tricky times from a people perspective. And that value-based leadership is a shift in thinking. And so if you're going to spend all your time on the transactional, we're going to miss a trick on that strategic value add. And I really want to comment on value. The concept of value is defined by your customer. It's not defined by what you think value is. Value is only useful or defined by the person receiving it. And so, something I urge my own people to do, and other finance professionals, is go sit with your client and ask your client what is value to him or her. And I find that very, very insightful.
That beauty in the eyes of the beholder is such
Correct.
an important principle.
Correct.
Also from a human interaction perspective. You often hear things like, but I don't know what is expected of me, or I'm not sure how to do it. Well, then you should ask.
Yeah.
And you usually get good answers.
Yeah, I think the future of the function is also in analytics.
Without a
There's an
doubt.
enormous amount of value that we gain in insights on just the analytics that sit in HR. I find that amazing.
Yeah, if you look at
Very exciting.
online real-time feedback and what the numbers can tell you, it is really fascinating. So, Celiwe, what advice would you give to HR professionals out there? People who are starting out in their careers, people who have a long road into the future and lots of value to add. What do you think? What would you suggest to them?
Firstly, besides getting to know the business and understanding that, I think that goes without saying. I think my greatest piece of advice is accept that it's changing. The change is actually going to start with us, so we have to accept that it's inevitable. And it's actually us as a function who are being disrupted fundamentally. And our ability to be able to adapt to that and therefore be able to enable that is becoming increasingly important. I think my greatest piece of advice, and I say this being a new person to the function who didn't grow up as an HR professional, is that the greatest enabler that we're going to be in the world that Aarti was describing is our ability to be able to create a workplace for everyone. And that's a difficult thing to do, but everybody who's coming into the workforce now is looking for a workplace for me. And what it is about, that the super connected workplace that enables me to be able to talk and converse and access what I want and then exit and leave if I need to. Oftentimes when I speak to people at Old Mutual, especially at our induction sessions, I'm talking to people about the fact that it's great to have you here, but I don't expect to keep you here forever. We keep you here so that you get the experience that you're looking for, and that may be for 6 years, it may be for 16 years, and it's okay. I think our function and our ability to be able to house you in that time and create an experience that's meaningful for you so you go out there and become the best version of yourself, wherever that may be, and a great ambassador for our brand is the most important thing. I think that's a fundamental shift in what we've been set up to do historically, which is employ people when they graduate and help them as they get into retirement phase. And we may well have employees in that spectrum, but many of them will come and go as they please. And our ability to be able to be open to that without being threatened by it, but also to continue to facilitate and create, not necessarily solely for our own organization's good. I think every organization and every country will benefit once we're able to just create those experiences individually for people.
Yeah, there's a much more of a focus on the greater good, and it's interesting that you're increasingly seeing instances of the boomerang employee, where someone moves to another organization and gets exposure in different areas that they wouldn't necessarily have had, and they come back to your organization.
Our CEO is one.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Aarti, from your perspective, tips, suggestions, recommendations you would have to HR professionals out there?
Yeah, I think, as I say, no different from my own function. I would say you must understand the business that you are in. Understand what makes the people tick, understand what is important to them, understand what the business drivers and the constraints are in your business, understand where your business is going to, and and that would enable you to understand what you can do to support that journey. I think we look to you to understand what's happening in global trends and what's happening at a macro level, especially in the country. And so what do we need to do in order to remain relevant to these global trends and maintain our competitive advantage both globally and locally. So we do look to you to do that. And that's the people component of things. And once you understand those two, I think you prove competence, and then you win respect and trust of your counterparts. And then, you know, you're seen as very much someone who earns their seat around the table.
Very good. Questions from the audience for HR and CFO execs? And if we can maybe ask, can we turn the lights down a little bit? I don't know about you ladies, but I feel a need for sunglasses and a sombrero.
There's questions on the side.
Question and the two questions on the front. If we can have the mic, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, there's so many of you here. Hello.
Just a minute. We're just going to get the mic quickly for the questions. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you for the nice discussion that you just had. I just want to talk about the trends that you're talking about, whether global or local, but the main one I want to ask your view on is what we keep on saying we need to change the way we do things in HR. And one of the things that we need to be mindful of is different needs of our employees. And I'm talking in relation to retirement planning, and we talk of we're not saving enough and things like that. And we find millennials, and I'm a millennial and I hate the word millennials, so please bear with me. We want different people in the organization wants different things when it comes to retirement. And currently, the structures that are mainly in companies are you need to save for retirement, there's a deduction every month. But most people are saying, I don't want to save every month for retirement. I want to do things differently. I want to maybe consider just going into property. In terms of retirement and the structure that's currently there, and I know Old Mutual offers retirement solutions, so I know it might be a conflicting question. Is there still value in retirement the way we're doing it, or do we need to think about how we do retirement structures in the organization for employees, considering that different people need different things? I'm from Limpopo. When I retire, I'm going to build a house in the villages, so I don't need to maintain a certain lifestyle that somebody who's staying in Sandton has. So I want different structures for my retirement planning.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, and yes, I am conflicted, but I say this as a person who herself has to think about her own financial planning, and I assume that you do. I think in many aspects of the workplace and in many aspects of what an HR function typically contains, there are things that we're going to have to fundamentally look at. Let's take the regulation out of it, because retirement provision has some regulated aspects to it that we need to, and I also think that you need to consider that all employers have to be responsible in some way. Responsible doesn't mean parenting, it just means responsible. And in that sense, I think being responsible in the future is going to possibly include the ability to create some optionality for people. Is it responsible to say people shouldn't provide for their own retirement? Probably not. Because when you're in your 20s or 30s, retirement looks far away, and anyone who's in their late 50s will tell you that it creeps up on you in an unbelievable way. So we have to enable people to be able to plan for that. But I'm not sure that we need to be as rigid as historically the function has been, because people are going to have different choices. Your example about returning to Limpopo is a fair one. Some people want to be more aggressive than any portfolio of choices you can give them in their fund selection, for example. It's all part of creating this workplace for me where people have a lot more power to make choices about what they want to do. There are consequences to some of those choices. We have to try and couch that for people. And it's not just for millennials. I think it goes across the board. You do find people in their late 50s who find the way that retirement provisioning is done now also overly restrictive. They may not want to contribute that much. They may want to do things very differently as they get to that stage. And our ability to create that inherent flexibility for people is one of the greatest challenges, I believe, in our function.
Yeah.
Aarti, I don't know if you have anything.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I debate all the time, being a millennial myself, with your colleagues around, can we please create some relevant products? And I know for a fact that they are alive to this fact and they are working on it, but it is within the law of constraints again. So you're absolutely right. You asked about the global trends though, and let's talk about some of those. I think it is around workplace mobility. How do we wrap our minds around this, and how do we strike the right balance? Work ethic is a concern in most organizations in any event. I think the global trends around what's important to organizations. If you looked at the CEO of BlackRock's letter most recently, that was very highly publicized around the purpose of business is to improve society, which I completely get and I subscribe to. And then how is your organization improving society? And that's what's becoming important to employees today and tomorrow. And all that conversation around the supports EVP type conversations, and how are you helping position the organization to remain attractive to tomorrow's employee. Daniel Pink talks about the conceptual worker as opposed to the information employee in his book Whole Mind, The Whole Mind or something, A Whole New Mind. And so how do we get our organization fit for purpose in terms of the skills that we have got to get into this design thinking and different values that skills that the new employee of tomorrow requires. So those are some of the trends, and then the trends of, as I said, mobility, but also working hours and how to deal with human employees versus the robotization. We had another question. Should we take a few questions at once?
Very good.
Her mic is not.
Sorry. With the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm currently supporting our CFO. Our organization's been through a number of changes over the past 18 to 24 months. We're currently going through another big change. A new exco was announced yesterday, and part of that process is obviously we're going to have to look at our finance organization best supporting the new company. And I think for me, we've got it's the challenge in terms of how do I best support our CFO in making those changes, aligning the finance function to the new organization, as well as then dealing with a fairly immature finance staff force, and balancing that, do we do the right thing for the organization in terms of, how do we manage the change fatigued companies, making sure that our staff aren't fearful of the future and what's going to happen to their roles. Part of it is around robotics and automation.
Yeah.
So just your insights on how I can best support both our CFO and his strategic vision, as well as then ensuring that our organization and the staff within that business are feeling comfortable and buy into this whole new change. Another change within the last 24 months. So
yeah. I think Celiwe can deal with the change management after and settling an organization after what is one of the most painful exercises one needs to go through in their career. But I feel like your finance organization have hit the reset button. And now what you need to do is equip them, and not just the CFO, but his direct or her direct reports, in terms of how do they liaise with other functions or teams or organizations to be able to very quickly skill themselves up to do more with less. And that's exactly what we're doing as well. We went through the very same exercise last year sometime, and unlike some finance organizations, I gave up a head count in order to employ an IT person in my team. And this IT person, it's obviously breaking all the rules, but rules of yesterday. It's okay for rules for tomorrow, because I need an IT person to sit with my finance people and write script to generate AI tools to quicken the pace of their function and their analysis and their reporting. And it can only come from an IT person, right? I also make use of marketing skills so that we can generate more useful reports, just more insightful sexiness. Our finance people can take it to a certain level, but then we need different people to use informatics and that to make it a lot more consumable by easily consumed. So there are a number of things. If you just double click and go a little deeper into the organization in finance to say, What is it you guys are struggling with, and how do you need to pull yourselves out of the space you're in and get and reach that maturity level that you spoke about? And there's a lot of things: technology, knowledge sharing with other teams outside of your organization. So, I mean, I often do that. I get my team, because as CFOs, we get a lot of exposure at peer-to-peer level, conferences and that. But let's break the rules a little bit, and let's get the finance people talking to another organization's finance people, speak the same language and learn from each other. And there's not a session I've had across different companies where I've started this that my people didn't learn. So you do need to think very differently and not be constrained by rules. And that's the refreshing thing about the new age we live in, is there's just really not many rules in terms of traditional thinking. I also think that cross-skilling is very important. So what I'm looking to do next is to teach my CAs Python coding. And so that's going to be really cool, but I'm looking to my HRBP to help and support me navigate all the governance constraints, or the different constraints I will have in the organization, and get these guys ready for this and up to speed technically. So those are the type of pragmatic things you can do, is really just understand where they want to get to and help them get there. In terms of the change fatigue and settling the organization down, Celiwe.
Look, sadly, I think if you spoke to anyone else in the room, there'd probably be 10 other people who will share the exact same story. Our finance function has gone through 3 CFOs in the space of 18 months. At one stage, the CFO who was acting was in the UK and not physically with them. And this is all happening in the midst of a listing, because we listed the business in the middle of the year. Yeah. So they are fatigued. They're fatigued just because they have to report and get numbers ready for the market as we prepare to report results. But they're also fatigued because they've had to deal with a lot of change from a leadership perspective and from their own role and relevance perspective. And I agree with Aarti completely. I think that people are missing the trick in terms of being able to share knowledge, even if it's outside of your own environment, because many people within the function that you support are going through exactly the same thing elsewhere, and their ability to help each other navigate and also realize that actually this is the new normal. It's almost always going to feel this way, and I think we're doing wrong when we think we're going to settle people down into a calm state and everything is business as usual. That business as usual term is going to be consistently disrupted in and of itself, and the ability to be able to deal with constant change in yourself is going to become increasingly important. I do think in these situations empathy is important, so admitting that it's tough, it is rough. We can't say, grow up, you've got to deal with the change. It is rough. It's tough what they've had to go through, and it's tough what they're going to face, having to settle their own selves down. So I do think that empathy becomes increasingly important, and the ability to be able to converse. I believe in my role, and I know we're going through the same change with our finance function as much as possible, to support Casper. Casper's for people who know Casper Trotsky, is a very internal energy, very intelligent, very analytical, very, diligent in terms of delivery, which is great. And I juxtapose that completely. My hair is different, my voice is louder, but also I spend a lot of time talking with him, talking with his team, and facilitating a lot of his town halls, etc. Because his responses may be very dry and clinical, which is the right response, but oftentimes it needs context. And jointly we can facilitate that and get to that end point. But one thing that we try not to do, certainly for our finance function, is to have like a kumbaya moment and say, guys, it's been really rough, it's going to be okay, we're going to get through this. We are going to get through this, but a lot of what we're going to get through is learning how to deal with this feeling that we're feeling now, which is unsettled, it's different, it's volatile, it's ambiguous for most of the time, and that's okay. That really is the new normal.
Good, thank you. There's a question there and there's a question there.
Hi. My question is more directed to Celiwe. I was just struck by the earlier statement you made regarding how you disrupted your the new recruits or the new talent that you bring into the organization. I just wanted to understand how the management or your stakeholders got buy-in, how you got them engaged, and to understand that this is how it's going to work, or that people are not always going to be there. How has that impacted the business overall?
So I think a lot of that is influenced by my own personal journey in terms of how I ended up in this role. So I did mention earlier that I've been in my role for 4 months, I think. I started in June. So I've been in my role for 4 months, and I don't come from HR at all. I'm not trained as an HR professional. I've never been an HR BP. I've never been a talent acquisition specialist. I've never done any of those roles. My background is in engineering, and I'm an MBA, and I joined Old Mutual as the chief of staff there. And a lot of what I was doing at the time with our CEO and chairman was around business readiness, but not from an HR perspective at all. It was really about getting the governances, the functions, the operating model, for lack of a better word, set up for the world that we were going to operate in as a listed entity. And a lot of that involved people, and it involved business strategy. So when the role became vacant, and I knew at the time that the role was not going to be a traditional, in fact, if I remember correctly, the role spec specifically asked for people who didn't have HR experience. So we were looking for chartered accountants, actuaries, engineers, etc. to take the role. And given that I was that, but also felt that I was very close to what the business was becoming, given that we'd been helping the executive office set itself up and also preparing for that listing, I felt I would make a good fit for the role. So I think already in and of itself, my appointment was disruptive to the function and to the organization, which gave me a lot of license to be able to, I think, challenge a few things that were the norm within the organization. So I think that the ground was fertile. I didn't just walk into it that way. There was a lot that happened around it that just, in a way, with great favor, ended up the way that it has ended up. I do think that you can't be irresponsible in trying to be disruptive. A lot of what I have had to do is spend time listening and learning and then unlearning. A lot of it has been about challenging my own perceptions and expectations from the function and how we enable it, but also fundamentally change it. It has to change. They know that. There's a few of them here. They know that it has to change.
I love hearing that. Thank you. Question there.
Hi. You guys talk a lot about disruption.
Can you take the mic?
You guys talk a lot about disruption in HR, in the business, and how we're going from human to AI and all the different functions. What is your thoughts about the emotional well-being of your staff in terms of adapting to all the changes, all the trends, and your feelings about coaching within that environment?
Yeah, I think emotional well-being of our staff is absolutely paramount, because as Celiwe said, we all are in people businesses and people matter, and without people we don't have much of a business. So there is a space and an importance that must be attached towards technology. But what that technology is doing is it's enabling us to improve in our roles, right? And as I said before, add more value in terms of what we can deliver to our clients. And so that applies at a micro level in terms of a department, and it applies at a macro level in terms of the entire organization delivering value to the clients. And that technology enablement needs to happen, but it can only happen with a happy workforce, right? And hence my point around the HR profession has been elevated thanks to the technology, because there's all this non-traditional ways of working, this impetus on new ways of working, and on organizations being socially relevant. I mean, we're talking to our board and HR director about social engineering through habits that we emulate at the JSE, so that we influence what people do in their own homes, in terms of responsible living as well. And those conversations I'm sure we would not have had 10, 20 years ago. So this importance of social engineering has surfaced as well. So that's all flanked with the issues that I referred to earlier, that the country is in a beautiful space of fusion. And I'm not the expert, the people expert, and I'm not, and neither are any of our business directors the people experts. So I think we do look to your function to be able to harness and nurture that employee wellness. And we're very alive that it means it's a lot more broader than it ever was before. You know, people are no longer motivated by just money, and creating that purpose, that meaning, and people come to work for meaning, and that is really the reality of today. You know, you can argue it's always been a reality, but I think the emphasis is here today, and so, you know, the HR function needs to support and be experts in this space.
Yeah, and she asked a question earlier about global trends, and wellness is a global trend in the people space.
Yeah.
I do agree with Aarti. I think, yes, it's always been important, but I think now your ability to be able to react to that has become increasingly important. So reporting leave days is great, and you start to understand where people are either unwell or just misbehaving, they're not coming to work, but actually what's driving that sort of behavior. Some of it can be leadership behaviors and leadership culture in that team, for example. Some of it may be location specific, people struggling to commute to where they need to get to, and your ability to be able to respond to their wellness needs, whatever that may be, is becoming increasingly important. For me, it links a lot with the benefits that we offer employees. Having creches at the workplace and gyms in the workplace is a part of it, and I'm not knocking it. I just think that there has to be more that's well thought through about what is it that people need that's going to make a difference to them working there. From a wellness perspective, it has to do with mobility, your ability to be able to log on and do things differently and arrive when you need to arrive and what you need to deliver. So our ability to translate that into some sort of contracting from a talent perspective and how we measure what success looks like for those people. For me, it goes beyond physical disabilities, which are important, and we need to be inclusive to those, but people have all sorts of different disabilities that you can't see. The rate of depression in this country, in fact globally, is so high, and our ability to be able to support staff who are stressed, but chemically within and of themselves have to deal with what they present themselves at the workplace. So it's not just about counseling and ICAS, it really is about understanding what that means for people who have to arrive at work every day, and how you start to create an enabling environment for them to be able to perform. Without negating the change, I keep on stressing that we can't say that workplaces are going to be happy places all the time. They just can't be. It's like being in high school. It's great to go to your matric dance, but it's painful when you're wearing braces. You go through different stages that have great allure and great difficulty, and the workplace is much the same. A lot of this for me relates to you understanding your data, understanding why people are either sickly, why your best performing teams aren't performing the best and why some are not, and why are some producing the best results even though they're in the worst areas or whatever the perspective may be. It goes back to your ability to be able to unlock the data that you have. It's unbelievable how much information organizations have, even from employee engagement surveys alone. My question a lot of the time, certainly to my team, is how are we responding to it? We do it every year, so we have the information. What have we done about the information we've gotten? And our ability to respond to what people are telling us is going to be a key differentiator in any of those trends that you're talking about. So the ability to innovate, to move quickly, to be agile, to start to interpret information and use it for the greater good, I think is going to become huge for us.
Thank you. The conversation is so insightful, it's really hard. Every time you wish you had at least double the time. I think there might be one more question yet. One very quick last question. I'm really sorry we're a little bit in overtime. Let's do one last question.
Good morning and thank you. I'm an HR BP in the retail industry, and as you know, the industry is incredibly volatile. Mine is to how does the millennial HRBP kind of get it through to the operator, you know, in terms of what it is that they need from us as HR. The industry that I'm in is very traditional in the sense that HR is for reporting, you know, HR is for leave, absence, and all those kind of things.
Got it. Can I go and then you can go?
Yeah.
So, thanks very much. I think I'm not an expert, and I'll leave it to Celiwe, but I think you should scare them. Really, I think you should scare them. Scare them about what challenge they're about to face in the organization, about how uncompetitive they are, or educate them about the competition out there. So I was at an investor conference last week, and we had a good mix of foreign and local investors, and they said, yo, the retail guys are complaining. And I said, well, when is the consumer ever happy? I don't know a space when the consumer was happy, because I'm a consumer, and the retail guys are suffering. So if you understand the trends, and thank you to our HR function, we attended some client centricity training, which was probably like ranking in the top training I've ever been to in my life. It was high energy, it was fabulous, it was all about scaring us. They really just scared us, and it was just energizing. And what they did was, on the retail point, they said, you know why? I shop at X because when I go to Y, even though X is more expensive, when I go to Y and I'm about to pay, then the teller and another lady are having a conversation, and I'm getting a Isidingo update by eavesdropping on their conversation, and they're not interested in me, and they just want me to pay, Whereas when I go to Y and I pay more money and I feel more, I don't know, more well received, and I feel special and I feel loved, and I'm sure you know which Y is. and the truth is, I'm the same. We're all the same, right? I'll pay more money if something says it's environmentally friendly because I feel more responsible in that way. So you need to really go to the nab of what's important to your client and what would scare your client, and deal with it there, and then say, here's how I can help you fill that gap. I don't know, it's just a thought.
Maybe for me to make the point, I'll just share a personal journey that we are on as an organization, and it involves our finance function. So we are in the middle of our 3-year budget cycle, and it's painful, especially when you're an enabling function like we all are, because you almost have to sing for your lunch and justify your existence. One of the things that's big in my budget for the next 3 years is we are changing our HR management system as a whole, whatever that may mean, but it's going to come with cost. I have an election. I can go into our budget forums and start to say to them, well, we need to change it, this is how much it's going to cost, here's how we're going to amortize the cost or capitalize it, and I'm sorry guys, but that's how much it costs. Or I think you can start to unlock what it means for them in a very particular way. I've got 6 front-facing businesses, many of them go across the continent, and many of them have little bugbears that sit within my business. Some of them are around turnaround times of how long it takes us to make a hire that's important to them. Some of them are about how quickly they can access their own personal information and how easy that is, and they need to either physically log on to their desktops or not. A lot of time was I spent just talking to people, understanding what it is that they enjoy about the function and what they don't, with the HRMS not even as part of the discussion. And once having a very good understanding of what it is that were bugbears that sit in my area for them, helping them understand what we can unlock. And this is not a perfect situation. There's no one single pill that's going to solve every problem, but I know we need to do it, because the only way that we're going to be able to get this right is to make sure that we're getting the data centrally and we have one version of the truth. But being able to translate that into a way that means something for the FD in my mass business, and the same thing for the FD in the wealth business, is the challenge that I face. And I did exactly what Aarti did. The first thing I did was I showed them a video, and it was a Unilever video. Yeah. It was a retail video, nothing to do with us. Yeah. Because I think sometimes in financial services we think it's very complex, particularly in insurance. We employ a lot of actuaries, it has to be really hard. And we are a consumer-driven organization. We're like any FMCG organization out in the world. We make stuff, we design it, and we sell it. And once you break it down as simply as that to people, and why the people decisions that they need to make have to be enabled a certain way, they got it.